Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Washed Ashore, the LRF Heck podcast. Today we have a few people joining me to talk about our digitisation project and what that involves, what it means for you, the public, how you can access it. Hopefully this will be a really interesting discussion. So I'm joined by the sort of digital archive team from Heck. So I've got Sean, Barbara and Max, and I'm also joined by two people from Max Communications, Geoff and Florence, and we'll kind of come to who they are and what they do in a bit. But I want to start with my Heck colleagues, Sean, Barbara, Max. Can you summarise what our digitisation project is, very sort of briefly, so that anyone who's listening can actually understand what on earth we're doing?
It's quite a beast to start off with. That's true enough.
Yeah.
I'll kick off. Feel free to jump in anyone. So the project is actually digitising our ship plan and survey report collection. The collection itself roughly numbers about 1.25 million documents. Roughly numbers, it could be 3 million for all we know. You never know.
Is there a secret cupboard somewhere that we
there might be.
Uncovered?
There's a trapdoor down the stacks with another 500,000 documents.
Tell me there aren't 3 million, Sean. We're digitising. We're having that. Max Communications are our digitisation provider. So we are actually capturing, conserving, and also digitising documents themselves, and then making these freely available in terms of the data and the imagery on our website. So in a nutshell, that's it in its simplistic form.
Great. So where do Max Communications come into this? What are they doing? I don't know if Geoff and Florence, you want to sort of say what you are as a company and how you kind of marry up with us.
Yes, sure. Max are a specialist digitisation company. We've been going for about 20 years. We're predominantly in the heritage sector, although we do digitise material for others. Really our role is to enable access and preservation of historic material. So for this particular project, we sit in the middle of the process. So either side, we've got at the start of it the original material, and at the end of it, there's the access piece, which is the website, the platform that people can then interrogate the data and search for material that interests them. So we enable that end part of it by creating authentic digital copies of the original material.
Great. So if I suppose to put it into a kind of picture that people can understand, Sean, do you want to start with kind of how start the process? You know, how do we go from the original document, and then if everyone else wants to jump in and sort of say, how do you go from the original document to the website? You know, what is the actual process of everything that happens? I don't know. Sean, Max, Barbara, do you want to kick us off with, you know, where the document comes from and what you do to begin with?
Yeah, I can go through the processes sort of from start to finish. So in terms of the processes, I believe we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think I have 7 in total. I think if you could correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but starts off with the numbering of the document. So that's sort of like it's in layman's terms, it's sort of its number plate, its unique identifier that's actually penciled in onto the document. Then you also have the capturing with the cameras, the converting of the actual images and the splitting of the images for individual documents, the indexing, sort of the cataloguing, and then with the QA and final QA of the actual data itself. I don't want to go too complex into it, just in case people don't understand sort of the process. I imagine that every sort of archivist in the world is shouting me saying, "That's not enough information, Sean."
Probably, yeah, probably.
And Max is red with rage right now.
Yeah.
No, it's good. That was a really good.
Data.
No, honestly, yeah, that was a really good overview. Yeah, it's always really difficult, I think, to kind of go over a project, especially one that's as big as this. But yeah, it's massive. It's a huge project. But yeah, I think really, it's especially where Barbara and I come into it as well. It's really we're quite active in the QAing side of things as well. So when documents are being catalogued or indexed, then after that, it then goes through a sort of a process of kind of quality control to check that all of that catalogue material is up to standard, so that it fits exactly what we need it to fit, and obviously so that it's accessible and searchable when it finally goes online. But that in itself is quite a job, isn't it, Barbara?
It certainly is. Yeah, lots to do there. Lots of interesting queries come out of that as well, and sends us off in all sorts of directions.
Yes.
Yeah, so I suppose a part of kind of digitising someone else's archive, Max Communications, you're not an expert in our archive, so you're kind of given a new archive that you might not have ever heard of before, or know much about maritime history. So what problems do you have with using the documents and accessing it, and are these kind of the questions you throw over to Barbara and Max and kind of say, what on earth is this thing?
Yeah, well, there definitely are some challenges of that nature, which Flo is best placed to talk about those at the moment. But I also wanted to ties in what we've just been talking about there, just mention some challenges that we've avoided for precisely the reasons that you've said. So one of the things about this project is the huge amount of subject matter expertise within the HEC team. And without that, I think this project would have been impossible for us, to be honest. So we'd have been able to do all the capture well enough and the indexing, but the final quality of the product would have been diminished. We'd have had some nice images, but I think the way in which the indexing was completed, the way in which we then matched up the indexed data, so that user experience on the platform where they were confident they're going to pull back all the relevant results, would certainly have been diminished without that subject matter expertise built up over years and years. So that was vital for us, and I think that's a challenge that we avoided because of that. And I think the other thing that was really important about it was because of that experience. It's an understanding that this is actually at its heart a really difficult project. It is complex. It's complex all the way through it. And that understanding with the HEC team that it's difficult and that it will evolve, and we'll talk about this in a moment with some of the actual challenges we faced, that then there was acceptance that there would be lots of queries, as Barbara mentioned. And, never once, I think, in this project, just over a third of the way through, we felt that we were overburdening the team with those queries, because everyone accepted that they were a vital part of producing the best possible output. So that was really important. But we, saying that, there are still some challenges. So the fact that the documents are changing throughout as we come on to a new part of the collection, and certain handwriting and surveyor errors. So names of places are really hard to read often, and there are multiple places with the same name. For example, Aberdeen is one. So there will inevitably challenges throughout projects of this sort. And I think part of the things to say is the acceptance. There will be, and the team then works together to get over them because of its complexity. The other thing about the digitisation part is that I think people often think that digitisation is just the capture bit. So Sean went through those 7 stages there, and it's interesting the capture was stage 2. And I think it would also have been a much less productive project if it had been restricted to just capturing the images. And I think it was a really good decision early on to say that's just the beginning of a digitisation project. It's actually the most important part is then extracting the information from the digitised images, because although digital images provide greater access, which which they undoubtedly do, because you don't need to physically go to the archive, the value of the data is still really locked into that image file. It's still locked in there. At the moment that you extract the data, you create a database. The moment you have a database, you have information that can be queried and combined with other databases in time. So you ask much bigger and more intelligent questions of the data, because you're able to create composite databases. So that indexing part, it can't happen without the digitisation, capturing the images, but it is absolutely vital again to create the best outcome. And it was not all digitisation projects do that, and it was a good decision, I felt.
Nice, yeah. So, Florence, did you want to add anything to that about, when these kind of queries come up? Maybe what's the most challenging one you've ever had come up, or anything that is difficult with our collection?
I mean, we've had quite a few sort of challenges. Geoff has mentioned most of them already. I mean, one of the things about this archive is the period that it contains is such a broad period that the documents are just constantly different. We don't have any two documents that are the same, which is fantastic. It's a really fantastic collection, but that does obviously cause difficulties with indexing.
Yeah.
I think my favourite thing we've ever had to query, and I know I've spoken to Max about this one a few times, is the 6 H's to the Queen.
Oh.
Oh yeah. I remember that one. Yeah.
Two reports for this ship. One which was just 6 H's on a piece of paper. So we had no idea how to go about naming her at all, and that's sort of one of the things that we find there are difficulties with it, and communication between HEC and Max Comms is fantastic for solving things like that.
We actually renamed HEC with 6 H's in commemoration of finding.
I was just thinking. You've just reminded me. Actually, I don't think I ever found that one in the register book, so I think I've got to go back to that one after this. But yeah, so yeah, that was an interesting one. Yeah, I've never come across anything quite like that.
No. So did you find out more details about the ship? Why there were 6 H's, or what it was doing?
No.
I think that I think if I remember rightly, the build year was the same year as the coronation year for Queen Victoria.
Yes.
And it was. And so I think that we sort of got to we sort of established that it might be hip hip hooray to the Queen. But I don't. Again, I mean that's it's I have no idea. I think like, definitely want to check in the register book after this. See if I can find. I spent ages looking for it, but I just couldn't find it anywhere.
So do you often feel with cataloguing and going through these records that you kind of become like detectives? I know sometimes a query comes through and Barbara and Max both get really excited and then they become like Sherlock Holmes, and I can see both of them ferreting around register books and other books going, what is it called? So do you get that sort of feeling of like, we didn't know this ship existed before, or that person, that surveyor, that location, you become a bit of a detective?
Certainly it is a detective story, isn't it, all the way through? I mean, every day it's like being a bit of a Sherlock Holmes, and it's quite sad, but it is very, very exciting. When you spend ages and ages trying to identify something, and you get that hooray moment, when you finally find it, and you can go back and say it's this.
It is quite engrossing, definitely. And I think it's something you've always said as well, Barbara. I think it always massively really depends on the surveyor as well. Some are just do exactly what they need to do, but then others provide this extra detail, which is just really, really interesting. But you just sort of think must have been completely irrelevant for people in London sometimes. But it's just it makes for a fantastic record.
So before we explore the kind of the surveyors, and maybe the surveyors that are on your hit lists and those that annoy you.
No.
I feel that might just be a separate podcast.
Possibly.
If we backtrack a little bit, can we sort of briefly, roughly explain what sort of documents we've got in our archive? The different ones that are coming out. I know there are so many, but what are people actually looking at on our website?
I'll take this one. So the bulk of what's in the ship plan and survey report collection is, as you can imagine, it tends to be a combination of survey reports, so drawn up forms that were completed by surveyors, looking at, obviously based on the particulars of a ship as they'd surveyed it. After that, it's then really lots of different kinds of correspondence. That's correspondence from the surveyors, it's correspondence from the shipbuilders, from the ship owners, also from loads of other different people as well that sometimes get involved. It's also as well certificates as well, so it can be things like certificates of class for when these vessels get classed, or it can be certificates for when the chains or the anchors get tested. It's also as well plans, so we have a huge numbers of plans really. I must admit I've not counted exactly how many we've got in the drop-down lists that we're using for the cataloguing, but it's a huge number of plans, from obviously like midship sections to profile and deck plans, to sort of like piping layouts, all kinds of odd different bits and pieces like that. And we also have other bits and pieces like photographs as well, which are a little bit more rare, but it's and then of course there's all the other odd bits and pieces that just happen to crop up every now and then. We can't really account for.
The rust.
The rust. Oh, the rust. Yeah, envelopes of rust. So yeah, it's quite varied. It's quite varied.
Nice. So, Max Combs, with digitizing our archive, we're probably quite annoying because we've got all these different types of documents, particularly our ship plan. So how do you go about digitizing a ship plan? The big ones or the small ones or anything, because they're incredible quality on the website, but some of them are huge.
Yeah, well, actually, we had to design a brand new sort of bit of kit for the big plans. Some of them were so big, so we created a what we called a rig, which is a rostrum-mounted camera, but it's got 6 cameras on it that all take images simultaneously, which then allows us to then, with a piece of software, stitch those. So it's it was a developed and dedicated piece of equipment just because of those plans. Were it's not only the size. We do come across other projects with them size, but also the condition of them. So it was never going to be for some of these plans possible to sheet feed them, although we are able to do some through a roller scanner. For these very big ones in this condition, we had to do them on the rostrum.
Yeah.
And that there was also then an element of how do we manage that, because we didn't want a single very large ship plan to hold up the production of the rest of the box. So we'd have to work that into the workflow, whereby that was set aside and then scanned and then reinserted. That's very much the sort of thing that Flo and her team work on, that sort of QA element, making sure that everything is tied up at the end as various parts of the project go off in different directions. Don't know, anything you want to add, Flo?
Not really, other than the largest plan we seem to have had so far is about 5 meters long. So that sort of gives an indication as to the different size that they can come in. We have tiny ones that are sort of the size of a smartphone, and then we have 5 meter long ones. The plans are spectacular, and getting those done is one of the things that actually I think we should be really proud of, because they are difficult to do. They can't be captured on one camera.
Yeah, I think you're right there. They are incredibly beautiful, even if you're not using them for technical reasons. Just looking at them, they're quite stunning pieces. And I know some people in HEC and others have sort of said, "Oh, I'd like that on my wall." Make a nice poster print. But yeah, no, I think that's an incredible achievement, just to be able to scan and have those fully accessible, those plans.
So to go, one of my favourite stories, this is from about 3 years ago now. We were doing a visit for a research group, and I'm not joking when I say this. A particular lady wanted the original document, midship section for the Cutty Sark that we have. And the best part about it was and she wasn't joking. I can promise you that. She just said, "Oh well, if I write a check," and I was like, "No, that unfortunately that doesn't work like that."
Oh, are we not selling our plans now?
No,
Are we
absolutely
not?
not.
Oh, I might have to go and talk to some people.
Wow.
Yeah.
I admired the front on this lady.
Yeah. God. Everything must go.
Yeah. Buy one, get one free.
Wow, that's brilliant.
Excellent. No, yeah, that's great. Yeah, so we're uploading the documents to our website, so do check out plans. Even if you're not interested in necessarily, as I said, the technical aspects, have a look, see if you can identify some of the ships and things. Yeah, they're really, really cool. So yeah, back to our friends the surveyors. Which I feel might be a contentious issue. How do you deal with firstly the handwriting, and then have you got certain surveyors that keep cropping up and you think, oh no, not him again?
Yes and yes.
Yes.
Yeah. I think Barbara can agree with me on this one. We've spoken about him before. Peter Collis in Guernsey.
Yes.
Who has some of the worst handwriting I have ever seen. Just terrible.
Yes, it is really a scribble, isn't it? It's so difficult to try to work out what he's written.
He goes into such enormous detail as well.
Yeah.
Which, so some surveyors don't do. So it's really appreciated, apart from the fact that it's unreadable.
Yeah, he's one of those that this would be absolutely great if I could only read it.
I think I'd like to chuck in John Tucker into that list as well. The surveyor of Canada, he in New Brunswick. He's got some really fantastic letters, lots of like kind of poison pen letters as well that he's kind of that he talks about, and lots of kind of interesting arguments and bits and pieces that he recounts throughout his letters. But he starts out with this really, really elegant handwriting, and then it gets gradually worse and worse and worse as you go through. Especially if it's a particularly angry letter, you can see that he's really, really pressed down hard on the paper, and things like that. And it just becomes so difficult. You have to take it like one letter at a time, and then it's just a nightmare.
So from these letters and surveyors' documents, have you found any, sort of gossip or any kind of arguments going on, or any drama, or anything fun and interesting, really?
There's a lot of drama with some of the surveyors. We had a series of letters at one point from a captain of a ship to the secretary of Lloyd's Register, complaining that the surveyor, when he'd gone to do the survey, was so unpleasant that, basically they were saying, we're pretty sure he was drunk. So there was this huge series of letters between the two groups, and I think actually they ended up sort of having a legal dispute over it.
Oh God!
Which is
God.
quite an interesting thing to find when you're looking at this stuff.
Yeah.
We've had quite a few things like that. We've had there was a series of sort of telegrams as well between a surveyor, the secretary of Lloyd's Register, and the surveyor's wife, because the surveyor hadn't informed his wife that he was coming home. So he asked the secretary to do it for him.
Yeah, the secretary's like, of course, I've got nothing else going on. I'll tell your wife. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh,
brilliant. So, Barbara, I'll talk to you. Come to you. Just you've been around the collection for a while. Are these stories that that we've never uncovered before at Lloyd's Register? Are the archive, is it so sort of unexplored that we didn't know these surveyors were doing these things, and that we've actually been able to build up maybe more of a picture around some of the ones we knew about, but maybe didn't know the full extent about.
Yes, we've certainly been able to build up a picture around these guys. We knew about, if you like, the more, to us, the more famous guys in our collection, and it might be because they were a principal surveyor or a senior surveyor of some kind, and for whatever reason they would have been on our radar, either because their families had asked about them, which is often the case, the descendants of them, or because they'd done great things like Benjamin Martel and him helping sort of getting the legislation through for load lines and things like that. So there were a number of them that were already on our radar, but this collection has given us, on the one hand, it's given us further insight into these guys, and one in particular that sticks in my mind is Augustine Cruz, who we in HEC have to be thankful for, because he was the chap that founded our library. And now to have actually seen, if you like, Cruz's day-to-day working, the letters he's written, the reports that he's written out and things like that, it gives you one of those sort of tingly moments to see all that sort of stuff. And then the other side of the coin, away from our sort of, if you like, our highlighted guys, is these bread and butter guys, these hundreds of surveyors who, over the years going back, have, you know, been filling in these reports and documents on a daily basis. And with many of them, because you can get a little bit of the personality behind them, either from the reports they've done, or as Florence has said, you know, these telegrams between the wife and the secretary, and you know, saying, can you tell her I'm coming home? You know, you get a bit more of the background to these guys and what they might have been like. You know, for the guy that you know, was receiving the poison pen letters, well, that could have been one of two things. Either he was a guy who was quite rightly doing his job correctly, and the ship owner didn't like it, or he might have had a different sort of personality and actually sort of stomped onto the ship and upset everybody, you know, when he was doing his survey, and that might have been the reason behind it. You know, we don't get to the actual reason, but it just sets you thinking in different ways about these people as well. But it's just great, actually. And then when with the earlier stuff, the 19th century stuff, which is what Florence mentioned with Peter Collis and Guernsey, where you get one or more complete boxes which are just full of the reports and the letters written by maybe just one or two surveyors, then you really get a sense of them and their work and what they were working with as well. And when you have someone like Peter Collis, yes, he's infuriating because of his handwriting, but he was the one that gave you backstories as well. You know, he was the one who, I can't remember the name of the ship now, but there was the lovely detail about the fact, this was a survey from 1834, 1835, something like that. But he gives the back detail that actually this ship was originally one of Napoleon's ships. It was that old. And there's this, oh gosh, probably half a dozen lines where he's given the backstory of this. He didn't have to as part of his survey. This is all part of his general remarks on the back. So you get people like that who you just think, thank you for the detail. Thank you for that. You've filled in all this lovely, lovely information.
So from an outsider's perspective at Max Commons, do you think this is, you know, maybe some of these stories are kind of helping to put Lloyd's Register in its kind of wider social, historical, economic, global context? Are you learning things about, you know, maybe life at the time in these various ports?
Yes, absolutely. Flo and team have much more day-to-day contact than I do. But absolutely,
we you know,
giving a greater sense of that, of the sort of the socioeconomic elements. I think is talked earlier about this being, you know, in the end, sounds a very dry way of putting it, but it is a database, and I think all of this information, when combined with other data as well, could really paint a very interesting and I think for research purposes useful picture.
That's what we like to hear. That's what we're trying to do.
And I think increasingly people are looking for that context as well. So we do work quite heavily with sort of genealogy sector as well. You can see some of this information being used to support that, in terms of, because within that sector there's still information to be captured that will help to identify a relative, but actually lots of people have done lots of work on that. Now they want to know what sort of life they lived. So they know who the relatives are, but what was it like to work in the potteries in Stoke, at the turn of the 20th century, for example? What did it feel like? And therefore, people want to look at the contextual information. It's almost like the leaves on the tree, isn't it?
Yeah.
Having grown the tree, so those leaves on it. And I think what's coming from this is very much that sort of contextual information. What was it like at the time? And that's why, as Barbara says, these reports that actually were probably not requirements at the time, that included all that backdrop, the backdrop stories, are so valuable because of that social element. I think it's true of the plans and the drawings as well. There's a real aesthetic to them. I wouldn't know my way around a ship's plan or a boiler to save my life, but I can look at them and really appreciate them as lovely things, because they give a sense of not just the technology of the time, but also that person's daily life and putting that sort of thing together, and the real skill of putting those things together, particularly the hand drawn items, which are some of my favourite, because they're so skilled and almost little pieces of art. I don't think it's overstating it to say that. So yes, that sort of social element is absolutely embedded within the material.
Yeah, I think that's a really nice sort of way of summarising and putting it, that though we're a maritime archive, I think anyone can access it. You don't have to feel that just because you can't read a boiler plan or a ship plan that you can't appreciate it or look at it or find other things with it. So I suppose that kind of brings it kind of nicely with all the stuff that we're doing with the digitisation, all the data and content we're gathering. We then are putting it on the website. So I'm going to go to Sean, who is our website master, and sort of say, are there any top tips for searching? If someone is looking for family history, or if they're looking for certain ships, certain plans, what can they find? How can they find it? And any top tips for people?
Yeah. So when we were designing the website, the main sort of content of the current site is the ship plan and survey report collection. So we built a lot of the site's sort of navigation behind that. So we've tried to split it into sort of two sections. If you want to be looking for ships, you can search for that. If you want to be looking for particular documents, you can do that as well. Now, if you're sort of a novice when it comes to maritime research, if you want to just search for ships, on the ship search landing page, we have sort of popular ship types. So if you don't really know too much about different ship types, you can actually sort of click through a click-through box and then navigate to, say, passenger liners, for instance, or ferries, or this, that, and the other. And you can also do the same with documents. However, rather than sort of ship types, you can do document types. So Max mentioned earlier, we've got photographs, survey reports, which make up the bulk of the collection. But if you want the more sort of personal stuff, then you can go to the correspondence and the letters. Aside from all of that, if you just want to search for particular documents or particular ships, you can do that. You can even search for particular surveyors, particular shipbuilders. So yeah, there's a number of ways you can actually search a site, and because I'm incredibly sad, I do like to check every now and again our sort of analytical data, and Google Analytics has this thing called user journeys, where you can sort of have a sort of a snapshot as to how most people are actually navigating the collection, and it is really interesting because there's no sort of one direction, I guess. There's numerous entry points, which is nice to see. So yeah, it's really I guess it's a journey of exploration. If you think you can search one way, then all of a sudden you go on the site and I can search that way. And it's something that we're constantly evolving. So when we get inquiries through from our website or from email or even tips from Maxcoms or KT, our website developers, then we actually think, okay, well, maybe we could do that better. So we'll develop something else so that the site can become easy to navigate, I guess.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it means that anyone can access it. Basically, we're not exclusive to just experts in maritime history. So I think we're sort of coming towards the end of it. So I'm just going to fire some questions at you. Hopefully some fun ones, and hopefully some that you have answers to. But yeah, these should just be a bit of fun. So. Question for you all: what has been your favourite find? Be it document, be it object, anything. What has been your favourite thing to find so far in our digitisation project? I'll start with Max.
I think probably I think I would have to say the train timetable. I think there was we found that the flow. Flo will be able to sort of verify this as well, but it was it was a lovely sort of train timetable. I think from 1901 that had been accidentally folded up into a plan from Hartlepool. So obviously the Hartlepool surveyor had been obviously at some point either passed a train timetable or had picked one up for himself, and it was a train timetable that showed the all of the prices and the train times for the summer of 1901 for, I think, Holyhead. Whether or not he'd just gone there or he was planning a holiday, I don't know. But I really like it because it was just one of those things that we weren't really expecting to be there.
I love that. Yeah. I love that. Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, it was brilliant.
Yeah. Anyone else got any other favourite finds?
I think my one, and admittedly I can't remember the actual name of the ship or even the correspondence, but I remember once I came into the office, and Max, but I don't know if you remember this, Max said to me, did you hear about this? And I was like, what? And he was like, the cat urine document. And I was like, what? I had to do a double take. I was like, did you say cat urine? I think, was it a survey report?
It was, yeah. That was, So that was for a vessel called the Seneca. From I think 1854, and it's got when it was discovered, it's got little cat paw prints all over it, obviously at some point this cat has just all through the survey report and several of the other ones below as well. So if you're interested, please check it out. But
so for those of us that are working from home with pets around us, I think we've all had to get off the laptop.
Yeah.
That.
Yeah, it was definitely, I think, a case of going, oh, what is that stain? And then going, right, okay, well my hands smell of a very particular very particular way. So it's definitely that. But it was interesting though, definitely interesting.
I hope we put that through conservation.
Well, I think that was the other thing. Yeah, I mean, it caused a bit of a stir as to whether should we clean it, should we not clean it? It was So I don't know. It's a bit up in the air at the moment.
Wow, the day in the life of someone working in an archive. Do we clean the cat urine or not? Problems. Have any of you got any on with your sort of favourite finds? Any favourite names of ships or any favourite surveyors? Unusual names that have cropped up?
Definitely. We've had some really fantastic ship names. There's two that we had were I'll Try, and then in pretty quick succession we had Try Again, which is nice. And they're actually both quite common names throughout the archive. We've got multiple of those ships, so that's always quite amusing. We've also, one of my favourite surveyors ever, who was actually, quite detailed in his reports as well. So it's not just about his name, but his name was Senhouse Martindale, which every time we say it, we just think, what a fantastic name.
Excellent name.
Really brilliant.
That's the sort of name, if you walked into a room, you would listen to him.
Yeah.
So,
many of the surveyors have brilliant names. It's quite interesting when you look down them, the wonderful names that they've had, and you just sort of wonder, what the background might be to these names. It's like Mordaunt Mulevera Parker, who was also quite artistic, and all sorts of wonderful names.
Or Francisco Schiaffino.
Yes.
That was a good one. I
Yes.
always really
Yeah.
liked his name. The surveyor at Genoa.
So,
there's one-
Oh, sorry, go on, Geoff.
I was just going to say there's one, wasn't there, Flo? It was I like the sort of lugubrious stoicism of it, where it's just called "Why Not."
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
I like the thought of people naming ships, and it's, that you'd think they put a lot of thought and effort into it, and you want something that, I don't know, says something about them or their ship or their business, and it's like, why not? I'll try.
Yeah. I must admit, I think one of the best ones that I've seen, which I quite liked, was, I mean, I think it's the great thing about having such a large data set like that, because you've got all these really, really funny ones like time is money. Which is a good one, and then you've got these other really bizarre ones like Rob the Ranter and things like Orlando Cakes, things like that. And it's just a bit all over the place, but they're brilliant.
So here's a challenge for any listeners: go on the website and find the most unusual ship names and let us know what your favourite ones are. So I think to kind of bring the podcast to an end, Heck team, this is coming to you. Why use our archive, and why should we be digitising it?
We should be digitising it because there is so much data wrapped up in this material. What we haven't touched on, we've said throughout this conversation about, how much index is going on. What we haven't said is there's nearly 130 fields of data that we can capture for each of those ships, for each of those records. And yes, you don't capture all of that data for every ship, because it's covering the different ships that you can have. So it's covering a sailing ship or a steamship or a motor vessel. So you would never fill out all of those nearly 130 fields for every ship. But the guys working with Max Communications, they do their darndest to fill out as many of those fields as they possibly can. And all this data then becomes available to the world. So the world can use this for their research. And what we hope to do at some stage in the future is maybe to be able to let people have specific data sets. So it might be that somebody might be interested in the ships that were built in a particular area or surveyed in a particular area. And we hopefully will be able to supply them a data set of that material that they can then work with. But that's sort of partly, what's been behind what we have been trying to do, not just to use this material for ourselves and to, if you like, enrich our archive and enrich our knowledge of our people and what our people were doing, but also to help researchers, not just, I use the term researchers loosely. I don't mean the professionals, I mean everybody. Anyone can use this material. So you might be a family historian who thinks, let's just Google, let's just try this name that I found in amongst the family papers. And then they can discover that, yes, they were an LR surveyor and find out more about them. So it's just, it's big data in its widest sense being used not just by us, but anyone can use it as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that kind of summarises it quite nicely.
I think we call that a digitisation mic drop from Bob.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that's that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's why we're doing it.
I'm glad we are. It's keeping us busy, if nothing else.
Certainly is.
Yeah.
Unless
absolutely.
anyone has anything else to add, I'd like to thank you all for joining me for this episode. I hope it was interesting for you guys to talk about stuff, and hopefully people have found it interesting to listen to. If you've got any questions or comments, just ask wherever we upload this to. Send us emails in, and obviously make sure to visit our website. Yeah, so thank you, everyone. We'll say goodbye.
Cool, thank you for having us. Bye, everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks very much.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.